This is a special Women in Journalism and Journalist Charity session with the lovely Bryony Gordon, who you can see on your screen in front of you. And this is a really we really wanted to do a special kind of webinar for our members, because we know that lots of people are really having trouble in the lockdown. And of course, Bryony's total superpower has been writing about mental health in particular. She's a #1 best-selling author, so I'm sure a lot of you know. She was a columnist for the Telegraph for the last 20 years, and she's also now does a brilliant podcast, which I had a bit of a listen to today, called Mad World. So I would really recommend that you have a listen to that. We're going to have a bit of a wide-ranging chat. We've had loads and loads of your questions, which is fantastic. So I'm going to put quite a lot of those to Bryony, and then we'll have some more questions at the end. And those of you who Jem has spotted will unmute you so you can talk to Bryony yourself. But I think why don't we kick off, Bryony, by talking a bit about the pressure to be productive in the lockdown. I mean, it should be kind of bad enough that we're all kind of faced with coronavirus and all the difficulties that's going on, but there seems to be this added pressure that we're all meant to be being kind of more productive than we've ever been in our lives. Do you want to talk a bit to that?
Yes. Hi, everyone, by the way. I wasn't expecting there to be quite so many of you. So if I start having a panic attack, I don't really know what to suggest. No, I won't have a panic attack. I put something up on Instagram the other day. I'd see, I mean, it was not an original thought. I'd seen it, someone had shared it, which was, and I apologise if I swear, which I will do. But it said, you don't have to be at your most productive during a fucking global pandemic. And I put it up, and it was like, it got, it resonated with a lot of people. And I'm as guilty of that as everyone else. I think we very much live, don't we, in a culture where we can see what everyone else is doing. So we think, why the hell aren't we doing it? And, it's really interesting. I was talking to a friend yesterday who has triplets, triplets. She has breast cancer, right? And she has a husband who's recently in recovery from alcoholism, right? And she said to me, Bryony, I just don't understand why I can't get my shit together. We're going into week 6 and I just still haven't got it. And I was like, whoa. I keep saying this to myself, actually, as much as anyone else. I say it to other people in the hope that I listen. But this is an extraordinary time. It is an extraordinary time, and our brains adapt to new situations really quickly, but that doesn't change the fact that it's an extraordinary time. The world has not ended, right? It's still spinning, but the world as we know it has, actually. And I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge. And I think a lot of people, I'm as guilty again of saying, I feel bad for feeling bad because I've got a roof over my head, and I'm well, and all the people I love are well, and what do I have to complain about? And I think that it's absolutely normal to be feeling a sense of lethargy and lack of energy during a global pandemic of none of us have seen in our lifetimes.
What would be your advice to people who are feeling feeling really kind of under pressure from the sense from outside that maybe they're not doing enough in the pandemic? I mean, I think it's really important that we say to people that just literally sometimes just getting through the day is quite an achievement.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, it is. It genuinely is. If you think, 600, 700 people a day are dying of this. So yes, it is really an achievement to get through the day. And I don't mean that that sounds very dramatic, but also I think that we are, in Britain especially, we're in a culture of we've most of us, the stiff upper lip mentality, which we hear so much about. We don't feel our feelings. So as soon as they come in, we go, pat them down. I don't know, for me, I patted them down with alcohol for ages. There's all sorts of ways we keep ourselves busy, with work, with there's all sorts of relationships, with drama, with and we are now being put in a situation where all of that has sort of, a lot of it has been stripped back, and I think a lot of us don't know how to deal with the kind of onslaught of feelings. So I would say that if you're feeling inadequate, maybe think about whether that is a true voice, or is it something you know, is it an inner critic that maybe is too loud? Do you know what I mean? Which you're giving too much. The whole thing is, I suppose 10 years ago, my aim would be like, I don't want to hear any negativity in my head, and I don't want to be sad. I always want to be happy. And now I realize actually the aim is to sort of accept that there will be times when we are critical of ourselves, and there will be times where that voice goes nah, 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 and there will be times when we're sad, and we've just sort of got to kind of let it wash over us and not give it too much, you know, it's not give it, you know, too much power, I suppose. So I think
when you talk about kind of feelings and tuning into feelings, that sounds like it should be something that you're right, that actually the first thing that you do when we start feeling something unpleasant is often to try and not feel that. Now, you were someone who used kind of alcohol and lots of other things to try and damp down uncomfortable feelings.
I like how you did lots of other things.
Well, I've been reading lots of your stuff today.
Everyone.
We'll get into some of those later. I was just wondering, I'm more interested in how you begin to allow yourself to actually kind of feel those things. Are there any kind of tricks that you do that when you begin to feel like that, you go, oh, hang on, I need to hang on to that rather than try and block it out?
Well, I think talking about these things is really, and having someone you can talk to. I mean, I guess even if you're just talking to yourself in your bedroom with the door locked, do you know what I mean? Just recognizing it. I mean, I've always said that it's really interesting, because going back to the journalism thing, that I remember when for the first half of my journalism career, women who spoke about their feelings and their emotions in their journalism were dubbed confessional journalists, as if they were sort of like, you know, revealing sort of bombshells. And I can see that thankfully that has changed. And for me, my writing has been a really good way to sort of get some distance between the kind of maelstrom inside my head and to actually put it on a page and see it. So that has helped me, and I suppose I've kind of gone off track here a bit, but you know, on a practical level, I think talking about it or writing it out helps you to at least recognize it and acknowledge it, and that's 90% of the battle, I think, you know, in terms of processing.
When you're writing in quite a confessional way, or if you're using kind of writing things down as a way of processing things, how do you act as your kind of own editor or filter on that, so that do you just kind of put out everything you put on the page? What are you censoring?
I don't think I censor. I don't know I don't know if I have an internal editor. You know, that's my problem slightly, but no. I tell you what, I do. I think that the line in my head is this gratuitous or is this helpful to someone else?
Right.
And if it's helpful to someone else, I write it. And it's always, and that sounds like very kind of like, oh, how selfless of you. It's just, that's in itself, it's not a selfless act entirely, because what happens is, you know, the first time I wrote about the form of OCD I've suffered from so long, called Pure O, the first time I took the step to go, I have this illness called Pure O, which sometimes makes me think I'm a serial killing paedophile. I'm not, by the way, everybody. But I would say that. No, I'm not. I can't. You're all muted, so I'm hoping you're laughing at me or with me. But like the first time I wrote it, it was like an act of desperation, really, and it was trying to say, I know there are other people out there like that have this illness too, but I've never met any of you. I've never spoken to anyone about it. So if you're there, please, will you get in touch with me? And that is what weirdly, and I never planned it, but that was an act of desperation. I remember sitting at my desk in the Telegraph sobbing with my colleague Joe Shute sitting next to me, and he was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No, I'm having a breakdown." And it was like I wanted to find other people, but I feel quite emotional thinking about it. I also thought, if I put this on paper and I put it out there and people don't all run away screaming and the police don't come and get me, then I know it's an illness like any other. So my thing is for me, it is a kind of, people say cathartic, but it is a kind of putting it out there is my way of finding other people like me. It's like my way of finding my tribe, you know, and there are so many of us out there who suffer from these things, you know, more of us that do than don't, I would say.
When you first did that column and you first wrote about it, what was inside yourself? What were you expecting the reaction to be? Was it a really terrifying thing to do?
I don't think I was expecting any reaction. I just needed to do it. It was like another one of my compulsions, you know. It was like a checking thing. Like I was basically seeking reassurance, which is what people with OCD do, and actually is not recommended at all by cognitive behavioural therapists. But anyway, it worked out for me in the end. But you know, so I didn't expect it. I really was blown away by the response, and you know, it seems now that mental health is talked about everywhere, and I can't remember, I wrote this column in like 2014 maybe, which doesn't seem like that long ago, although actually it does, everything seems like at the moment, but it was a different, I don't know, I guess it was a really different landscape out there. I look back at me in 2014 and me now, and I can't believe it. I genuinely can't believe it. I can't believe that I lived like that. I really can't. I lived in that pain and that darkness and somehow managed to get somehow managed to keep my shit together. Like, it blows my mind every day. And I'm, yeah, sorry.
No, but do you think if you that now, I mean, I think now if you're somebody who suffers from OCD or from anxiety, it's something which is much more discussed and talked about. I mean, I was thinking, listening to your podcast with Nadia today, it's amazing to see people who have been so successful and so kind of high profile talking so honestly about their own kind of often inabilities to cope. And I think that 7 years ago, actually, that wasn't really allowed, that we've come a huge way since then. What would you like to see happen next? You know, what's the next frontier on mental health?
Oh, well, I mean, we've only got an hour, haven't we? What I want to see is that the government realise that just talking about mental health is not enough, right? So I often see this where people are like, oh, another celebrity, another high profile person has chatted about their anxiety and their depression, and you know, and the government seem to think that this is the cure all. It's not, obviously. And what I hope by encouraging to people to talk about it is that we realise how many people suffer from it, and then the government have to take action. We need huge investment in mental health. I mean, we need huge investment in all the health services, frankly, you know, and I really hope that this moment in time is a wake-up call for us. So it's not just about investing in things like ventilators, PPE, CCAP, or whatever the thing they, you know what I mean? It's about investing holistically in our health system, because you know, a happy country is a healthy country and vice versa. And and I read a really interesting piece in the New Yorker the other day about how all pandemics, all viruses that spread, they expose a flaw in the society of the time. Do you know what I mean? Yes. I think this is, you know, it hugely shows up healthcare inadequacy and inequality and all of the rest of it. And I hope that it will be a moment for the government and for governments generally to invest more rather than cut again and again and again.
I know that your next book, which is called A Brilliant Rock Bottom, you sent that to me on a text, and I wasn't sure if it was a joke or not. Yeah. And I was wondering that talks about you're going there in that one, which comes out in August, talk about your alcoholism.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a bit about the links between addiction and mental disorders?
Okay, well, I mean, again, the interesting thing was it was only through like writing about my OCD and, you know, and finding myself accidentally in the mental health community and this community of activists and, you know, going around and speaking to people about it, that I realised I had a problem with alcohol. I laugh about it as if it's funny, you know. So I can't even begin to explain how important opening up about my mental health has been, you know, because it has led me to a place where I'm nearly 3 years sober. And, you know, I still have issues and I still experience ups and downs and all the rest of it, but I now have the tools to cope with it. You know, I can deal with life on life's terms much more. And I really do put that down to that one thing. And I sometimes worry that people think, oh, now what's she writing about? You know, oh, alcoholism and addiction now and all of that. But it's a hugely important part of my story. And there are so many stigmas still attached in mental illnesses. But there's a huge amount in alcoholism and addiction, and where perhaps you wouldn't blame someone with depression or schizophrenia or psychosis for their illness. There is a sort of sense of blaming people who have alcoholism and addiction, like it's almost like it's a choice. And I've realized it's not a choice, and very often it's a way for people, you know, the double whammy of alcoholism and addiction is that often it is a way to cope with an existing mental health issue, right?
Yeah.
So there's layers of it on, you know, and so it's incredibly complex. And in our society, you know, most of us are brought up that the only coping mechanism we had for life that we learned from our parents was, they're having a glass of red wine at the end of the day. And I'm not at all blaming, you know, anyone on that, but I'm just saying alcohol is a depressant that masquerades remarkably well as a relaxant. And I don't want to spoil anyone's fun. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a massive fun deficit out there at the moment. So if you can drink responsibly, please go for it. But I'm aware that there are a lot of people that can't. And there's a shame attached to that, because it's like, well, hang on, this is sold legally on supermarket shelves. Why can't you drink it responsibly? And, you know, often it's such a complex illness, and there's so much shame attached to it, you know.
What would you say is the kind of crossover point between, you know, maybe getting to the end of a day on lockdown and thinking a glass of wine would really like lift the spirits or move you into a different place, and using alcohol in a much more kind of dependent, addictive way?
I mean, I think people know, and if you even have to ask the question, but like, I think there's also degrees of it. Okay. So like,
yeah.
You know, but it's really hard. For me, my life had become almost completely unmanageable because of it, you know, and I was spending more time and more energy trying to prove that I wasn't an alcoholic. And in the end, it was actually easier for me to accept that I was and take the steps to deal with it. It's a really interesting one. I had so much shame about the way I behaved, and Glorious Rock Bottom I've been very nervous about it, and I was really relieved when my publishers were like, we're putting it off till August, because I was like, oh phew, I get a couple of months reprieve from people's judgment. But it includes a lot of stuff that is really dark. Like really dark. I was assaulted towards the end, you know, stuff that was happening in tandem with on the one hand, my career was going whoop, you know, and on the other hand, I was, you know, sinking to depths of, I was going missing for, you know, 24, 48 hours. It was really dark. And I thought long and hard, and there was a lot of stuff I haven't included in it. But in the end, it was like, is this, like, either I know, having met a lot of other women in recovery, that they have been through similar things, like almost identical, and my alcoholism and my problems all thrived in shame. Like they all were fueled by shame, and it became like a shame sandwich. And I'd go out and drink to like create a different shame that would bury the other shame. You know, it was like a KFC tower burger of shame, you know, and eventually it had to fall over. And I think either we accept that, like, to me, it was really important. It's been really important to write that stuff, because either we accept that we want people to get better and we want people to live healthy, constructive lives, and if we want them to do that, they have to talk about this stuff that happens. It happens, you know. I'm not the worst person in the world. I'm just another person who happens to have had this illness. And I don't do any of that shit anymore. Like I don't. Funnily enough, I haven't gone missing for, 48 hours since I got sober. And my husband was the person who first said to me, I was always saying, I'm such a bad person, I'm such a bad person. And he would be like, Bryony, you're not a bad person. You're just an ill person who sometimes does bad things. And I really hope that compassion that I was very lucky to have from him, because a lot of people get sober and realize they're married to absolute assholes. I was lucky to realize I was married to someone very compassionate. But anyways, well, I just want to, I don't know if I'm going to...
Do you think that women are particularly harshly judged when it comes to kind of alcohol or those kind of blackouts? Or
of course they are. And you know, it's such, you know, motherhood, you know, we don't judge dads who go out to the pub on the lash, or do you know what I mean? And it's honestly, it was one of the biggest issues, was like, how could I behave like this and also be a mum?
Yeah.
If I thought becoming a mum would be the cure, right? I was like, I'm pregnant now, I'm not going to drink. I didn't drink while I was pregnant, do you know what I mean? I know people in recovery who did. Okay, so this is, you know, if anyone in this room right now has experienced that and feels huge shame for it, it is an illness that is so powerful. Like, it is so fucking powerful that it got me to run a marathon. Like, genuinely, I ran that marathon because the first marathon, because there was a pint at the end of it, right? The second one I did, I hated every moment of it because I was sober, and I thought it was going to be really easy because I was sober. It was far harder because there was just nothing at the end. Do you know what I mean? And alcoholism it's so powerful at it. You know, we put it in front. You know, the truth was, I always thought the most important thing in my life is my daughter, but the truth is, until I got sober, it was alcohol, and that's the truth. And I don't feel ashamed of that anymore. I have exposed that shame to the light, and I just want to be able to help other people who might be living through that shame right now, and sort of hope that they can read it and start taking those first steps.
There's a really interesting question that's just coming through actually on the chat, which is saying, Bryony, what are your techniques for being aware that people will be judgmental about your writing, but still being able to write these very candid columns of books? So do you know that when you say write a book about being an alcoholic and a mother, that there will be, you know, inevitably some kind of, you know, negative reaction to that? How do you kind of prepare yourself mentally for dealing with that kind of criticism?
Well, I remind myself that criticism is the reason these things need to be written. As long as there's judgment out there, we need to write these truthful things, okay? And also, I just feel sad for people that judge people that, you know, have been vulnerable and honest. I sound like some counsellor here, and if you told me I would be speaking...
That's true. That's true. It's true.
I think about people that judge. If someone judges me, I just think, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that you've wasted your energy feeling like that about me, instead of thinking, that's interesting. I wonder if there's anyone in my life that, you know, might need some help, or, you know, or, oh, that's an interesting take that I'll take through my life and not be so, you know, I just think it gives me fire, you know.
Yeah, no, I think that's super admirable. Do you share, if you're going to write about something kind of quite dark, do you share that with your husband, or, you know, with your mum or people close to you before you write it? Because I remember when I used to write quite confessional columns, which I have done, I used to get into terrible trouble with my family. I remember being told off by both my mum and my dad in the one column, which is like almost unheard of.
Well, my husband refuses to read anything I write. But then I refuse to read anything he writes. He's a journalist as well. He works for Bloomberg. I mean, he writes some really boring stuff. I don't even know. He's in the other room right now, like doing, I don't know. But no. But listen. Everything. He knows everything that is in the. I would never do anything to hurt him.
Right.
Now, I mean, that sounds bonkers, because I have done things to hurt him, you know, in my alcoholism and all of the rest of it. But we have spoken about all of that, and he knows that. He's like, if this helps people, I don't, you know, why would I stop that? And then my other rule in terms of writing columns is that I never write anything, and the person who I'm most horrible to is always me. Like, I don't ever want to be nasty about anyone else in a column. I'm not interested in that. Like, it's not my position, it's not my place, you know. And I think as long as everyone else in your column comes out as, you know, like my husband is always like, he has read a few things. He's like, you make me out to be some sort of like white, like knight. Do you know what I mean?
Saint.
I'm not. And my mum always says that as well. And like, so my mum has read Glorious Rotbottom, and obviously it was not easy for her to read that. And but I've allowed, I kind of like allow people to read it and say, you know, and if there's anything that upsets you about the way you're depicted, please tell me and I'll change it. And she was like, no, I sound lovely in it. She was like, but, you know, are you sure that you want to put this out there? I was like, yes, because that's your reaction to it. You know, but obviously it was hard for her. But I try and write everything with kindness and love, and I don't want to write anything that doesn't help someone. Like if it causes grief to someone, I'm not like, I just don't want to do it, you know.
I think I think that makes perfect sense, and I think that's quite a good jumping off point for. So what do you think around all the kind of Harry and Meghan stuff, and quite a lot of because I know that you did that amazing podcast with Harry,
yes.
And of course they've really opened up the whole world of kind of mental health. I mean, what's your view on where they are now and what they should do next?
My view is that they're not hurting anyone. It's tricky. You know, they are, you know, they're friends of mine, and you've really put me on the spot. I wasn't expecting it. I don't know why, that was so naive of me as a journalist.
Sorry, I'm a journalist. I had to ask the questions. I did say to you before, if there are things you don't want me to ask.
I do. Yeah, you did. And I'm like, no, I'll never. I'm like, always ask. No, I really feel for them. And I think that, you know, it's a completely imperfect situation, isn't it? And my thoughts about it are that I have absolutely no idea how I would handle being in that position. Do you know what I mean? And the way I would feel about it. And I think that they are two humans trying to navigate their way through life, and it's not, I don't really want to judge it. They're not taking any money. You know, I just think, I think they can become sort of people to what they become. You know, I think high profile people can become sort of like figures that we put all of our issues onto, and we blame, you know, and I think, and actually I think Meghan's often said it, is that the thing people are getting angry about is often not the thing. So I think it's symptomatic of something much larger in our society, and I'm big fans of theirs.
And do you think, I think they've really helped to open up the conversation around mental health. I mean, I think that's been an amazing kind of gift, particularly given Harry's own background.
Yeah, I'm like, can we not forget that? Like, I always remember when I went in to do that podcast with him, and I was literally like, he's going to talk really generally about mental health. And I was like, okay, I've got like half an hour to get something out of him. And all I had to do, it became very clear, all I had to do was like just sit there. I didn't have to say anything. And I was like, what the fuck is going on here? And I remember like walking out being like, it
was an incredible scoop.
Well, it was, yeah, but it was also like, for me, it was an incredible moment. Like, I was like, oh my God, I'm sitting here and he's telling me I'm a fuckwit. Like, why is he talking to me about this? You know, it was like a moment of like, you know, I guess that moment of opening up, and, you know, it doesn't all have to be sort of stiff upper lip, and I don't know, it's still something I find really bizarre, and it's really bizarre because I kind of know him a bit now, and it's one of those things where he's not the kind of like figure that I perhaps thought he was like 4 years ago. Do you know what I mean? Before I'd ever met him, so it's weird. But what I will say is that it was such a privilege to play a tiny part in that moment. Like, if I think back to this time 3 years ago, like when the marathon, you know, Heads Together was at its peak, and the marathon had, you know, and we like, I think we raised like £60,000 for Heads Together, and there was such a wonderful feeling. I remember that week in April, where people were talking about this stuff really openly, and it was wonderful. And so I'm really proud. That's like, if my career never peaks higher than that, that's totally fine. I remember going out for lunch with my editor a while after and being like, oh, I need to get you another big scoop. And he said to me, Bryony, you don't ever have to get one again. That's it. You've done it. Like, okay.
That's a good thing to be told in your career, that from your boss, that it's fine. You've kind of, you know, got the big tick for the rest of your life. Do you think that now they're in America, they'll go on being that valuable to that conversation in a mental health way?
I hope so. I think they want to do that, you know, I think they want to do all the kind of good cause stuff without getting the grief of being on the public pay packet. That's the kind of way I take it and understand it. So yeah, I'm sure there's loads of great stuff coming up. I don't know. I haven't, like, I've been slightly
Okay.
preoccupied with other stuff in the last 6 weeks.
We've got loads and loads of questions from people wanting to ask you how they should be surviving lockdown. So could you can you maybe give us, because you're now seen as like Mrs. Mental Health Guru, how should you get down through the day if you're feeling more anxious because you can't kind of go out, or the people saying that they love kayaking, they do loads of exercise and they can't do that kind of exercise at the moment? What are your tips for how to kind of keep your head together?
Okay, so I think before lockdown, I'm sure lots of other people find this. I dreaded things like my alarm going off. I dreaded looking at my diary and going, what the fuck do I have to do next? And now I'm like, I dream of such structure to my day. And I think that trying to create a sort of structure for your day, however basic, is really important. And the exercise thing, which I'm sort of vaguely aware is going on in the chat, is so important. Like I try and do a piece of exercise each day. So this morning I ran 5k, and it's not and I think like just lowering all of our expectations, do you know what I mean? And also knowing that this isn't gonna, it does feel like it's going on forever, but it isn't going to go on forever. The other thing, and I feel sort of slightly like a bit of a traitor saying this in a room full of journalists, but limit your news consumption.
Yes,
it's really fucking bleak. Like, I mean, it's always bleak. I mean, like, I'm not like, I open up the Mail and the Telegraph every morning, I'm like, what brilliant news, you know. It's news is obviously mostly negative, but I do think that when there is nothing else, you know, there's very little else other than coronavirus, and it can be kind of slightly warping, you know. But also, I just think that accept I don't know if anyone here has lost anyone, or, you know, it's just like, I think we all really just need to go easy on ourselves.
I think that's all very good. That's all good, very, very good advice. And do you force you've been someone who's been through ups and downs, do you force yourself to work on days when you're feeling really low?
No.
No, okay.
But that's a very new thing. I used to, but then I thought, no, I can't. No, that's not true. I do sometimes, but I make sure I'm really honest about the way I feel when I'm doing that work. And but I'm also, I used to be really bad at taking time off for my mental health, because I used to think that actually just working kept me preoccupied, and then I realized it was just a distraction and I wasn't dealing with a thing. And I also thought to myself, well, if I'm unable to take time off for my mental health, what about everyone else? Like, I'm somehow accidentally a sort of spokesperson for it. I'm like, this doesn't bode very well, does it? So now I do it for everyone else, obviously selflessly, but I have to take time off.
And when you say you take time off, what do you do? What does that taking time off look like?
I mean, it's not very exciting.
No, but what do you do which helps your mental health? That's what the people on here are all saying they want to know.
I really find it bizarre that people want to know. Like, I feel like I'm some sort of like celebrity. These are the questions I used to ask. These are the questions I ask people in interviews. It's very bizarre. And every time I like to meditate and do yoga, and I don't do. When in my free time, what do? I like to go away. I like to travel. That's one of my favorite things. I like to see my family. I miss my family a lot at the moment. And read and just hang out and walk and do a bit of exercise and do really simple things. I'm not very interesting in that respect.
No, I think they're kind of pretty basic, don't they, really?
Yeah, I don't have any like secret hobbies or anything.
And you're not like kind of doing a Rubik's Cube or something to kind of calm the brain.
I would have written a column about it if I could.
Do think that celebrities and things being more open about their mental health has meant that normal kind of civilians can be more open about it now? Do you think, like, people like you talking about it, or that we're talking about Harry and Meghan, do you think it's now more acceptable? And, you know, if you can say to your boss, actually, I'm having a really low day, I don't think we're quite there yet, are we?
No, I think it is more acceptable, but I think there's a long way to go still. And I think that there's always that sort of like, oh yeah, job done. It's like, no way, we're at like the foothills. There's a long way to go to change the culture in work, to change, just, you know, because even those of us who are sympathetic to people with mental health issues have those own biases in our own head, because we've all been brought up with them. It's very difficult to get past them, you know.
Yeah, and I think people are still much more likely to say that they've got the flu, or they're kind of physically sick than mentally sick.
I still sometimes default to that, because that's just what you know, it's very difficult when you've been conditioned to be like that, to kind of change up your you know, your mode. Yeah, there's huge leaps to be made, but I do think that we're in a much better position than we were. Sorry, I'm just scrolling across to see to look.
Yeah,
at
just having a look.
Hello everyone.
Yeah, that's good. Jen, should we get some of the people who are in this room to ask Bryony their questions directly? We had some lined up earlier.
Yeah, for sure. 2 seconds. Let me just go to one now. So we had one from. Let's go to one from Sophie, who had a question around podcasting. So you should be unmuted now, Sophie. Give it a go.
Ask away. Oh, there's Sophie. Hi, Sophie.
Hi. Thank you so much for doing this. It's been really, really interesting. I just wanted to ask around podcasting, Bryony, what are the kind of main things you've learned from doing a podcast, and anything that journalists should know before starting their own?
Okay, so the thing I have about podcasts is that there's a lot of them. Okay, so I was very reluctant. I've always, like, we did 2 series of Mad World, and then everyone's like, when are you going to bring it back? And I'm like, well, all the guests that I would have asked are on everyone else's podcast, and you know, like, I think it has to be, but we brought it back for the coronavirus, because I was interested in the kind of you know, I was interested in I wanted to speak to the first episode was some nurses who'd been as part of the response to the Ebola outbreak in Sierra Leone. I wanted to get their information that was actually practically helpful for doctors and nurses who might be experiencing trauma with triage and stuff like that. So I was like, I think my advice would be, like, has this story been told before? Do you know what I mean? And, like, even if it has, make sure it's this is your angle and this is your voice, and don't just do a podcast for the sake of doing a podcast. Basically, I think that's really important. I think podcasts are brilliant, but I think it has to have a real, like, USP. And I guess that's like any form of media, isn't it? You know what I mean? But I think that, yeah. So I love listening to podcasts, but that would be my advice, basically. If you've got a story to tell, it's like anything. If you've got a story to tell it. But if you don't bother.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's helpful.
A bit like, yeah, Bryony, thanks. That's what I would.
Is there anything specific about how you tell stories or you interview on podcasts which is different from how you would do it if you were doing it for a print interview, say?
Well, so the thing about the podcast, what I love about podcasts, right, Sophie and everyone, hello everyone again, is that there's an intimacy to them. Okay. The other thing I love about podcasts is you don't have to transcribe. What's not love? But I think that it's hearing that is the intimacy and the conversation, and you want it to. I guess my favorite podcast, I feel like I'm just listening. I've like eavesdropped into someone's conversation, you know, and it's that warmth. And I also think I want to hear, like, I think there's a difference when you write an article, when you write up an interview. I mean, there's a huge art to writing up interviews, and I think that it's much easier to let people hear the person talk, you know. But I do think you have to give them. Sorry, burping. Don't burp during podcasts. That's very bad passion. But I think you have to give them the space to talk and sort of listen intuitively, and not be too like, know what you want to say, know what you want to ask, but also know that it will go in its own direction, and you've got to let it go. You've got to let it go in its own direction, as you would in a conversation down the pub or whatever. So don't try and be too rigid. You know, like I always have written down the points I want to ask about, but I don't think, and I have a vague idea of the order in which I think they might flow, but you've got to let the person, you've got to hand it over to the person, and make them feel as comfortable as possible. That's the key, really. Let them know that you're not out to get them.
I think that's brilliant advice. Right, Jem, next one.
Right, amazing. Right, we're going to go to Samantha now. I had a question about, well, I'll let her take it. You should be able to talk now.
Hello.
Hi, Samantha. Hi. Nice to see you.
I'm just wondering if there was someone you really wanted to interview, your dream interview, who would it be?
And you've done Prince Harry, so you can't say Prince Harry. It's got to be someone else.
I mean, I'd quite like to interview Donald Trump. Isn't that fascinating?
I mean,
in a non like White House, where you sit him down, you go, listen, mate, we're going to have a chat here. And I want to talk to you in the most open and sympathetic way. There's people. It sounds so cringy and cliched, but I'd quite like to interview you, Samantha. Like, everyone has a story, right? Is it Samantha? Yeah. She's muted herself, so I can't. But
yeah.
That's fine. Feel free.
Yeah, let's hear some more from Samantha. What would you ask Samantha, Bryony? What would be your first question?
Samantha, how are you really right now? Really, 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 really.
Really. I'm okay. Could be better. Could be worse.
Okay.
I'm grateful. I'm feeling grateful mainly that I'm okay.
And I was like, I need to know a bit more about Samantha. Like I do. I mean, like, do your research. Yeah. I think just, I don't know. I could interview anyone, really. I chat. I like chatting to people.
I'd love to see you interview Donald Trump, because I think that you might actually, I mean, he's got all sorts of weird kind of nervous tics and things, hasn't he? And he's meant to be also be quite OCD, and he will only eat food from McDonald's, which hasn't been like touched by anyone else. And he's got all sorts of strange tics, and not to mention drinking disinfectant.
Juliet Ricks has just said, what would you ask him? And I think I would just ask him, I'm like, are you okay? Really, are you okay? What do you want to talk about? Like, has anyone ever given you a hug? I don't know. Like, I just feel like...
You don't want to give Trump a hug, Bryony. Not even you wants to give Trump a hug.
But, like, is there anything you want to talk about? Other than drinking disinfectant?
Fantastic question. Jem, let's have another one.
Awesome. Right. Let's go to Cheryl, if I can find you. Cheryl Decision,
I love seeing everybody in their rooms. Where's Cheryl? I bet she's got a very elegant sitting room. Where are you, Cheryl?
No. I'm actually self-isolating at my brother and his girlfriend's, and I cannot put my video on.
Cheryl, come on.
Oh my God! How embarrassing! I haven't even done my hair.
Nice pictures.
Hi, Cheryl.
I'm so embarrassed. I've gone bright red. So, first of all, Bryony, I think the honesty around your struggles in your journey has been so refreshing, and has certainly parts of it resonated hugely with me. I have suffered from depression. I suffered greatly with anxiety, and some of my coping mechanisms in the past, I don't mind admitting, have not been great. Yeah. So I think by sharing that, it really resonated with me, and I thank you for that. But my question is, some of us, or I look at my team who are predominantly a younger team, is how do you get around telling work that without, I think you touched on it earlier, you don't want to lose face to say, hey, I'm struggling. You're still able to do your job, you're just having a bad day. And like you said, well, I'm just going to say I've got flu. And how would you approach that with work? In terms of, and I'm talking like, but I know some of my team are struggling, and I'm saying to them on a day-to-day basis, how are you? What can we do? We have an employee assisted program, but I want them to be honest. So
you're doing all the things that you can. You can't, this is what I say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And I think that all you can do is create a safe environment where they feel they can, and hope that they have people that they can talk to. And if anyone is at the moment struggling with work, because I saw in the comments that there are people who are, you know, and there was a point that was really well made, which was that people were talking about all the free time, you know, what to do with all the time. I'm so bored, and people are like, "What? How could you be bored? I've never worked so hard in my fucking life." And you know, and that thing of being able to find someone that you trust. Trust is so important to speak to, and it may not be someone in your company, and it may be someone, it may just be a friend, you know, like, and get that a bit of distance, or you know, get conversations going. What I will say is, like, if there is anyone now watching who is struggling and feels like they can't cope, like, no one has ever got better from something by not talking about it. It really is better out than in. And it's, first of all, find someone you trust to talk it through, and it may not be someone in your office, it may just be a friend or something. And you don't, also the other thing is like, hold tight, you know, look after yourself, you're precious, yeah, and you don't, try not to panic, and it will be okay, and you don't have to act, you know what I mean? Like, I think I also felt like I had to resolve things immediately, stressed out, I need an answer to this, and often if you just wait and you just allow yourself to feel those feelings, I hate that this is my answer to all my questions, just feel your feelings. It will help. But I think it's brilliant, Cheryl, that you are you know, that you allow, that's really important. It needs to happen from the top down, you know. We need in journalism and in the newspapers, we need to foster this culture where we allow, you know, we can't just have people writing about it in papers, but it's not matched up by the people having to, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm really strong and passionate on that, so well done.
Well done, Cheryl, and thank you, Sujan, so much for letting us do this on your platform and all the support you give women in journalism. We love you, Cheryl. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jem, let's have another one.
Yeah, right. Hopefully we should be able to go to Anthony now. He had a bit of a question about kind of like just the ups and downs, really, and how you kind of cope with that. You should be able to speak now, Anthony. I'm not quite sure where you are on my screen, but give it a go. Oh, can we hear you?
We got Anthony?
Oh, right. Maybe we'll come back to you if we can't hear you. We'll go to Rosie Hopegood next. You had a question a little bit earlier on. You should be able to speak now, Rosie.
Hi, Rosie.
Oh no, where's Rosie?
Oh, she's talking, but we can't hear her.
Oh, she needs to unmute herself.
Hang on.
Oops. Oh, Jem, you've been doing so well.
We've been doing so. All right, you should be good now. Oh, I think it might be your microphone. Oh dear. Right, okay, that's two on pause. Let me scroll up as
we email me.
We'll come back to you. Sorry, I'm just scrolling up.
Anyone got
a few more questions, Alan?
I've got lots. One of the questions I was really interested in, which is on the list that we were sent, was what advice would you give your 15-year-old self?
Oh God, hang in
I
there.
like that one.
Gets better.
It gets better, yeah.
Don't be such an asshole to yourself. Like, genuinely, be a bit nice. You're literally not the worst person in the world. You are not a piece of shit that the world revolves around. So don't worry so much. Just don't worry. My mum used to say, just let it go. Like, all the things that basically my mum was saying to me at 15 are what I would say to myself at 15.
I know, but the problem is that they don't listen. I've got a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old, and it doesn't matter how much you say it will get better. You know, being a teenager is not the world's best.
Other thing is accepting that people do have to go on their own journey, right? I hate it. I sound like such a cliche. How is it come to this? But people have to realise it in their own time, and it's painful. It can be really painful to watch, right? But you know, that's life. As long as you're there and you're open and you love them and you let them know that you're there for them, I think, you know, that's all you can do.
Yeah, no, I think that's really true. Jem, have you got anyone else that we can bring in?
Yeah, I think we should be able to go to Anna now. Let's give this one a go.
Okay.
Hi, Bryony.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Anna.
Hi.
Hey, hi.
I just wanted to ask about pitching mental health stories in general, really, because I mean, there is much more getting published these days, but I guess I've got stories I would like to pitch, and I've tried, but I've never got anywhere. And do you have any tips, basically?
Well, I guess it's a bit like the podcast thing. It's like find the angle that hasn't been done, you know, and or try and make it as human and personal as possible. But yeah, it's finding the angle. And what kind is it? Kind of personal stuff, or
yeah, but it's like an ongoing thing that's been like probably my entire life, 40 years worth. So it is pulling out which bit to pitch, because otherwise it's just like a splurge.
Yeah, well, obviously, but I mean, maybe just imagine you're sitting talking to a friend this is what someone told me when I first started in journalism, when I was at the Express like 108 years ago. And someone said to me, imagine that you're in the pub talking to a mate, and what would you pull out first and second? You know what I mean? And like, just do that like as an exercise. Like, what are the most key bits? Yeah, that was, and I still do that now. Good luck.
You have to think about kind of what your kind of hook is. You know, what's the kind of, I remember a brilliant journalist I used to work with called Margaret Driscoll saying to me, she was one of the best feature writers I've ever known or edited or whatever, and she'd always say, what's the kind of vignette, what's the diamond which tells the whole story kind of in that first paragraph? And that's where you begin, with that kind of vignette, which is the whole kind of encapsulated in one tiny diamond. I think that's the best bit of advice I was ever given.
Thank you.
I know that we couldn't get Rosie Hopgood on the line, but she's put her question up on the chat, and she's saying that she could agree more about battling feelings of lethargy at the moment. And she said she's finding it really difficult to concentrate while working, something she doesn't usually struggle with, and then she feels guilty about not being able to concentrate. Have you got any thoughts on what to do about that, Bryony?
I mean, just accept it. I think everyone is. I was speaking to a friend of mine, a journalist called Paula Bell today, and she has to start writing a book this week. She was like, this is just awful. Like, there's this weird thing. We were talking about it, like, when we expected the apocalypse to come, we expected that we'd be like running away from zombies, wouldn't we? And we'd be or trying to scrabble for food in a nuclear holocaust. And I don't think any of us expected it to be. It was this sort of very strange thing where it's like, why am I having to work? Like, why are you making me work? I didn't expect I'd have to work during the apocalypse, and I can't concentrate. Of course you can't concentrate. It's just awful. This is a shit. Okay, this is an absolute shit show, and so go easy on yourself, you know, and it's probably a more normal response, but also I think just I have a tendency when I can't concentrate to kind of just procrastinate wildly, and I think it's like, just say, right, I'm going to get it done, and it's going to and whatever I have to get done, I'm just going to get it done, and then because otherwise it's just going to fucking weigh. Sorry, I don't mean to swear. It's just going to weigh on you for the rest of the day or the rest of the week or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, just make life easier for yourself.
Yeah, get it over with. Kind of say, right.
And it doesn't have to be perfect. Just make sure it's like factually correct. You haven't libeled anyone. Do you know what I mean? You haven't just
not a disaster.
Back to basics, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to.
There's a good Sheryl Sandberg thing on that, which is always done is better than perfect. I've always been a great believer in that, you know. Yeah. Done is better than perfect. Doesn't have to be the most brilliant thing ever. Just get the thing done. I'm always saying that to my children when they're procrastinating about their homework.
Yeah, absolutely. Done is better than perfect. Yeah, who wants perfect anyway?
No, perfect, much too tiring. No. Particularly in a lockdown. Just getting through the day is good enough.
Yeah.
Oh. We've okay, this is a last question. So it says, hi Bryony, question: when your mum had her car accident and you had to deal with all of that and your child and work, how did you get through it? And how do you cope with being pulled in all those different directions at once?
Oh, that's like real knowledge. I also went into rehab the week after my mum had her car accident. So that I can't really tell you how I got through that period of my life. It was bizarre. I remember getting her to come and stay with us to look after her, but I remember she was sort of more looking after me. I don't know, like you just get through these things, don't you? And I somehow, and again, you just get through them, and you don't, the best advice I ever heard was, you don't have to sometimes I think, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go to rehab while I've also got to send my child to school and do all this work. And someone said to me, you don't have to enjoy it. You just have to do it. Just get through it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that's the best. Yeah. I don't know. I have no idea is the answer. Humans.
I think at the moment, I think a good kind of lesson from this is just get through the day. You know, don't try and make it perfect. Don't try and make it look like everything's really amazingly good fun. It's a really tough time. Everybody's feeling it, and just know you're not alone, and that everybody's having trouble, and just keep buggering on.
One of the things they say in AA is it's just for today. And I remember when I first got sober, I was like, fuck off, is it just for today? I'm never allowed to drink ever again. But I now see the benefit of living in the day rather than worry. And I remember when I got sober, I said, but what, I've got a wedding to go to next year. What will I do? And I remember this person said, do you have to go to the wedding today, Bryony? And I was like, no. And they're like, okay, so let's not worry about it. Just honestly keep it in the day. Deal with what you have to deal in front of you, and go easy on yourself, you know.
Okay, and very, very last question, because we're kind of at the end of our time, which is, what is your favourite Netflix series at the moment? What's your biggest recommendation?
I'm actually really struggling for one, so if anyone has any recommendations. I watched, the thing I watched the other day, which I loved, was Quiz. Loved it.
Yes. Yeah, that's really fun. My hot tip, for what it's worth, is Call My Agent, which is a French show. In French, it's 10%, and it's absolutely brilliant. It's really got me through.
Okay, the thing I'm going to say, which is I think it's going to surprise you all, because I think you'll be expecting me to say something very highbrow, like Eleanor just did. But the thing that I've been watching a lot of with my daughter is Ninja Warrior. In for a Penny. This is the ITV primetime Saturday night slot, and she's obsessed with Ant and Dec. So we've been watching the reruns of Ant and Dec's Saturday Night Takeaway for this season, and it's you track the coronavirus coming for you. So like in the first episode, everyone's going woo, and they're making jokes about people winning toilet paper and how that, and you don't want to go on holiday right now. And then towards the end, there's like no one in the audience, and then at the very end, it's just them in their houses like this. That's not, but we've been enjoying it a lot. So
no. It sounds really good. I think we're going to end it there, but I just wanted to remind everyone that this it's been so fantastic having Bryony, and thank you so much for having her. Thanks to Cision for hosting us, and lovely Cheryl, who supports women in journalism so much, and Jem for getting it all together, and Hilly for organising. So many thank yous, but a particular thank you to the Journalist Charity, because Bryony won their big prize. She won the Journalist Charity Special Award for outstanding work for raising the profile of mental health. And there's actually quite a good synergy in all of this, because the Journalist Charity is one of the few people who have been handing out grants to journalists in need, financial need, through this crisis. They've already given out, tens of thousands of pounds. And if you are one, or you know somebody who could really benefit from a Journalist Charity grant, they really are there to help. And what we've really been trying to do at Women in Journalism is to create this kind of network of people, so nobody feels that they're alone, and everybody feels that there's somebody that they can talk to, and that we're all here and we're all in it together. So thanks so much, Bryony, because you've been the superhero of all of that. We've been so grateful to have you, and thanks for everyone who's taken part. And it's so lovely to see Anna and Samantha and all the people who've asked questions, Sophie, in their houses. Great kind of books and kind of escapes anyway.
I can see loads of people that I've worked with in the past, and I want to go hi,
yeah.
hi. But also, if anyone has any questions that they couldn't ask because it's complicated and confusing, they can just email me, which is just bryony.gordon@telegraph.co.uk. And I'll try and answer them. I mean, they may not be very interesting answers, but I'll do my best.
And Bryony also, when she first came on at the beginning, agreed that we're now going to have a Women in Journalism series of chats with authors, because there have been so many conferences and things which have been, and literary festivals that have been cancelled this year. So we're going to have a whole Women in Journalism series of those, and I think we may have Bryony come back on later in the summer to talk about her book. So anyway, yeah.
In my room.
In your room with your bed.
This has literally been the highlight of my day, seeing all these faces and everyone just listening to me talk about myself. I'm like, this is, as everyone in the room knows as a journalist, it's like, it's very bizarre, but also it's like, finally, my day has come. And everyone's having to sit interviewing other people, asking them, what do you do in your spare time? I'm like, wow, someone asked me that. So thanks everyone for humouring me and listening to me and not falling asleep.
Oh no, you've been completely brilliant. So thank you everybody. Thank you so much to Bryony. Thanks to the Journalist Charity. Thanks for everyone for coming in, and we'll see you this time next week. Thanks a lot.